All right, so I was just watching an episode of the Pull Out podcast. Shout out to Steezy Kane, Phil, and Alejandro. It's a very, very entertaining podcast to watch. Now, on this particular episode, Alejandro brought up the debate of the N word and its usage amongst different races. Now, this is something that I've been meaning to make a video about for a while because I feel like I have a pretty unique perspective on this matter. But at the same time, I think that depending on where you're from, you might agree or disagree with me. And that's perfectly fine. I'm not here to impose my opinion as the right opinion, but I'm here to give my 2 cents on the matter. Now, to give you guys some context on my life, I am half black, not fully black. I'm half black, half Filipino. I am from the suburbs, and if you don't know anything about the suburbs, basically the black kids want to be white and the white kids want to be black, just to sum it up. And in addition to that, I'm from Texas, which could be considered the South, depending on where you're from. So, as far as the N word goes, my take on the topic is that I don't see anything wrong with people that are not black saying the word. I don't see anything wrong with it depending on the context. Now, I don't want you guys to just take me saying that as an N-word pass, because even though I might be okay with it, not everyone is okay with it in the way that I am. So, if you take that word and go saying it recklessly wherever you want, you might lose your life. And that's no exaggeration. There are people that will take your life from you, that will end your life prematurely over you saying that one word. And it sounds ridiculous. It sounds very ridiculous to take somebody's life or to cause somebody physical harm over a word. But that's the reality of the situation. Now, I want to explain why the word is so offensive. And I'm going to get into the semantics of the A versus the ER and all of that. I don't plan on saying the word in this video because it's not really a part of my vocabulary personally. And I'll get into that later on in the video too. But the reason why the word is so offensive, just to put it out there, because some people, they don't understand why it creates such an emotional response in certain people, especially black people. The word is, and I'm talking about with the ER, of course. When you use that word with the ER, that's the equivalent of making fun of somebody whose parents have died. If somebody's parents passed away and you made fun of their parents, they're going to be pretty mad at you. And I understand that none of our parents, depending on how old you are watching this, but for most of us, our parents didn't go through slavery. They didn't go through slavery. They weren't on those ships. I understand that. But most black people, especially those of us from the South, have experienced some degree of racism in our lives, whether it be through profiling or through Xbox Live parties, whatever. These words do hold a lot of weight to them. That one word is a very impactful word emotionally. And like I said, you're making fun of somebody's whole entire lineage in a sense. You're undermining all of the things that their ancestors might have gone through. Now, with that being said, we are the ones giving that word the power. White people don't give that word the power. Non-black people in general do not give the N-word with the ER its power. It's black people who give that word its power. Because it is only through our emotional response to that word that white people feel inclined to use it. Or not just white people, but you get what I'm trying to say. That people feel inclined to use that word as an insult. An insult is only an insult if it affects somebody. Now, if we collectively decided tomorrow that that word is no longer offensive, people would more than likely stop saying it. Because the only reason why somebody would ever use the word with the ER at the end, aside from in a debate, if they're in a debate setting where they just want to avoid trying to work around the word, they just want to say it. The only reason why somebody would ever say that word outside of that context is because they want to offend you. That's literally the only reason why. If you've been in an Xbox Live party, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, you know what I'm talking about. I've heard it. Believe me, I've heard it plenty of times in my life. But it only holds the weight that it does because of the emotional response that we provide. If we don't give that emotional response, it holds no meaning. Now, I hope that I kind of provided some insight as to why the ER is so offensive, even though it should go without saying. But the main point of that is that we are the ones that make it offensive, not white people, not the history behind it. I understand that there is history, there is context. I am well aware of this. I am black. I understand this. But at the same time, if we decide that the word is not offensive, then it's not offensive. Now, as far as the N-word with the A at the end, that's a whole different discussion. And that was the basis of what Alejandro was talking about in the podcast, was that if the word is so offensive with the A at the end, then why do black people use that word as a term of endearment? And if I'm being completely honest, I agree with him 100%. I agree that it should be an all or nothing type of thing. In a perfect world, it would be. But it's not a perfect world. There's a lot of context behind this. And depending on how you were raised, you might have been conditioned to be offended by that word. But as I explained earlier, we are the ones that give that word the power. So, in my personal opinion, I don't get offended when somebody says the N-word with the A at the end. Whether it's a white person, a black person, Asian, Hispanic, it doesn't matter. Do I get uncomfortable? Yes, I do. I get very uncomfortable when I hear, especially white people, say that word. But I'm also well aware that that is probably because of my conditioning. I've been conditioned to believe that that's how I should feel. Therefore, that's how I do feel. But I can't ignore that feeling. I can't ignore the way that I feel when a non-black person says that word. It makes me feel uncomfortable. Now, am I going to go and hit somebody or check them over that? No. I'm not going to get lost in my ego over a simple word. But like I said earlier, some people might, and that's something that you want to consider before you add that word to your vocabulary. Because if you say that word around the wrong person, regardless of the context, doesn't matter if you're at a concert or anything like that, that might be it for you. That might be your last day on earth, unfortunately. But here's my thing. And like I said, I agree with Alejandro that it should be an all or nothing type of thing. If the word is so offensive, if you feel like white people or non-black people in general should not be able to say the word, then nobody should be saying the word. It's hypocritical. But at the same time, that is ignoring the context of the word. Because the word, at its core, was used as a racial slur from white people to black people. I could be wrong about that. Maybe I need a history lesson. But to my knowledge, that's where the word stems from. So any variation of that word still has that same inherent meaning, even though certain people, particularly black people, have taken that word and distorted the word and its meaning to fit their vocabulary, their vernacular, their slurs, their slang. And like I said, it's not a black and white type of thing. There's a lot of gray area. That word is in a perpetual gray area. Now, to anybody who feels like they can say the word, especially black people, if you feel like you can say the word and non-black people shouldn't say the word, I want to offer you a few situations. The first one, if a white person were to go up to another white person and use the N-word with the A at the end to address that other white person. I know it sounds goofy, but I'm from the suburbs. I've seen all of this before. How does that make you feel? Do you feel offended by that? You shouldn't feel offended by that, logically speaking. The only reason why you would feel offended by that is because of your conditioning. And because you're the one giving that power to that word. A white person should be able to say that to another white person. Now, on the flip side, let's say a white person goes up to a black person and addresses them by that. Maybe with good intentions, but they exhibit a certain level of ignorance, right? How does that make you feel? Now, me personally, if a white person calls me that word, I feel uncomfortable because of conditioning. That's the only reason why. I feel uncomfortable. I don't feel offended, but it doesn't feel right to me. I don't feel like I should allow that to happen on a consistent basis because it would rub me the wrong way to the point that if it continued, if it persisted for long enough, I might have to say something. I might have to speak up, especially because I don't say that word myself. Now, at one point in my younger years, that was a regular part of my vocabulary. I used that word in almost every sentence until I realized the hypocrisy of what I was doing. And not only that, but that word is a crutch word. It's just like saying like or or. It's a word that you lean on because you lack the vocabulary to put together a coherent sentence, an articulate sentence. And that's something that I had to realize. Now, I'm not trying to talk down on slang. I understand that this all comes with context. It's the way that you're raised. I was raised in a middle to upper middle class community. If you're from a low income community, you're more likely to say that word. Now, let's say a black person calls a white person that word. How does that look? How does that make you feel? If you're going to call a white person that word, how can you get mad when that white person calls you that same word back? Especially if the context that you use it in is as a term of endearment. You're saying that in a friendly manner, but you're expecting them to not say the same thing back to you. Make that make sense. It doesn't. It doesn't make any sense at all. But we've been conditioned to believe that it doesn't have to make sense. That it's just not the right thing because that's what history tells us. And a lot of these ideals are passed down from generation to generation. And it's an ego thing. You feel like you want to maintain that legacy. But at that point, you are a walking contradiction. You're a walking contradiction. It's very hypocritical of you. But like I said, I'm right there in the same boat as you. Because let's say, for example, if I were dating a white girl and she's listening to a song that I'm playing in the car that uses the N-word. Now, like I said, I don't use that word in my regular day-to-day life. But if I'm listening to a song that has the word, I'm not going to skip over it. So if I'm playing that song, logically speaking, I shouldn't get mad if the white girl says that word in the context of that song. It's a song lyric. They're supposed to say it. But I wouldn't feel comfortable. I'd feel very uncomfortable. In fact, I'd probably turn the song off and we could just ride in silence. But why? Why does that make me feel uncomfortable? Conditioning. Because I choose to give that word more power than it actually has. What is that word? It's a collection of syllables and sounds. That's it. You add context behind it, yes. But at the same time, we don't go through those things anymore. Does racism exist? Yes, I'm not denying that at all. But by giving the word so much power, we're perpetuating racism. We're not making racism any better at all. We're making the situation worse. We're keeping the world where it is because we're creating more of an illusion of separation between the races by creating exclusivity through these words. Like I said, it doesn't make sense when you say it out loud. But I'm right there with you. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right because of how we've been conditioned, how we've been trained in our minds. But these are the questions that we need to start asking ourselves if we want to move forward, not only as a race, but as a society. If we want to make progress in terms of acceptance and integration and just allowing people to go through life in the way that they want to without these restrictions, the first thing we need to do is take the restrictions off of ourselves. We need to undo this conditioning, acknowledge what happened in the past, understand that, yes, it may not be the most considerate thing for somebody who is not of this color to say that word. And just an FYI, I don't think anyone of any race should ever say the word with the ER. To me, that word should not be, there's no reason to ever say it. But as far as with the A, I think that people need to, at the very least, agree to disagree and not be so sensitive to it, including myself. Like I said, I'm not any exception to this at all. But the moment that we decide to take that power away from that word is the moment that it loses its meaning and thus its impact. It's as simple as that. If you want to end racism, you have to end it. You can't rely on other people to change their ways. You have to change your perception of other people's ways. But that's easier said than done. And honestly, it is 2 o'clock in the morning right now, and I'm just ranting at this point. And I still need to finish watching their podcast.